DuPLESSIS submits Israel Adesanya via rear naked choke in the 4th round to retain his middleweight title with the UFC. Did you guys enjoy that fight? I thought it was an incredibly fun fight, mainly because both DuPLESSIS and Adesanya came to fight. Let's look at the fight overall and then break it down fighter by fighter. So overall, it was such a fun fight because DuPLESSIS managed to match Israel's output in terms of the striking. A lot of that has to do with the fact that both Adesanya and DuPLESSIS are switch hitters who just fluidly switch stances from orthodox to southpaw and continue to throw their strikes as they're switching. So the big differential, of course, as we knew even prior to this fight, was DuPLESSIS' wrestling and his blast double. Now, I'll admit that I thought that Israel would win via his striking, but I did have to acknowledge that DuPLESSIS certainly had the advantage by far in terms of the grappling and the ground game. This came into play in the 2nd round, where I thought Israel was like in deep trouble when DuPLESSIS took him down. Izzy was on all fours near the cage, and DuPLESSIS just patiently put all his weight on Israel's back. And then DuPLESSIS took Israel's back, got both hooks in, meaning he straddled Israel's back and put both of his ankles into Israel's inner thighs, kind of locking up his lower body. And then DuPLESSIS was going for the rear naked choke from that position, and somehow Israel managed to escape and get back to his feet and return the fight to where he wanted it, which was in the striking. 3rd round was really great. Both fighters picked up the action in terms of their striking, and what I thought was really smart on Israel's part was he did start throwing more body shots and more uppercuts. Again, I was impressed by DuPLESSIS' defense and striking. Although DuPLESSIS does favor that sort of MMA guard where you palm the top of your forehead with both hands, it was enough to minimize damage from Adesanya's punches to his head. Now the question is, did that 3rd round take a little too much out of Izzy? He did say in the post-fight press conference that he came in, I think, 3 kilograms heavier than he normally does. And while he said he felt strong and felt good, on the what we call it unconscious level, your body has to compensate for carrying around 1, the greater mass, and 2, circulating the blood, the oxygenated blood to just, even though it's just 2-3 kilograms, it's still an additional burden on your cardiovascular system. Now in the 4th round, Israel got clipped. I couldn't quite see exactly what the sequence was where he got clipped, but his reaction was to turn and run with his back to DuPLESSIS. Now, my original martial arts sensei, Mas Takahashi, would always tell us, never turn your back on your enemy. And that's exactly why. Also, that fellow who makes those really humorous UFC animations has kind of poked fun at Israel for doing that turning his back and running away thing. And that turned out to be, in my opinion, the fatal flaw in this fight. Now, in the post-fight press conference, Israel said something else. I couldn't quite understand what he was saying. That he said, "Oh, I made one mistake," but maybe you guys heard it better than I. But as Israel's running away, DuPLESSIS just comes up right behind him and continues to throw strikes. That's on Israel. He basically blindsided himself, and then DuPLESSIS takes his back, gets him on the ground, and is able to sink in the rear naked choke this time, which was kind of foreshadowed by the action that took place in the 2nd round. Now, I imagine at this point Israel is a little more drained, and so he didn't quite have enough to fend off that rear naked choke. So I have several questions about Israel Adesanya's, a few of Israel Adesanya's choices in this fight. One was, coming in even just a little bit heavier into the cage. Was that a conscious decision? And secondly, do you want to ask your body to deal with that in a title fight? If this is something you've never asked your body to do before, how's your body going to react? Again, all of this occurs on the unconscious level. You can consciously think one thing, but your body is going to react how it reacts. I'll cite an example from my own personal experience. So if you've seen some of my shorts where I'm working out in the boxing gym, hitting speed bag, jumping, hitting the heavy bag, doing the slip bag. So throughout those workouts, surprisingly enough, because I monitor my heart rate, surprisingly enough, the jump rope and speed bag do raise your heart rate significantly. But overall, throughout the course of a workout, my heart rate is only in zone 5. Zone 5 is 90 to 100% of maximum heart rate. I'm only in zone 5, definitely less than 10% of the time. But in a fight, I'm almost 100% in zone 5. Even though, I'm still doing the same thing that I would be doing, say, in a sparring workout. The thing is, because it's an actual fight, your adrenaline is just pumping. So now you're asking your heart to do a lot more than it ever has during practice. Even though you simulate, fight conditions, it's still not the same. So those of you guys who wear a heart rate monitor and have managed to wear your heart rate monitor during an actual fight might have also noticed that difference. Second question mark I have for Israel is the choice to always stand up between rounds. Now, again, even though he might be used to that, some fighters make the argument, hey, you never sit down on the stool when you're sparring in the gym, so why would you sit down on the stool during a fight? Well, I kind of just answered that because your system is under much more physical stress than it is during sparring. Regardless of how you feel, your heart has to work harder. So if you're standing up, that means your body has to bring the blood that's in your feet up to a higher height to reach your heart, so your heart can then pump that blood that just came from your lower extremities to your lungs to get reoxygenated, come back to the heart, and then now your heart also has to work harder to pump that reoxygenated blood throughout your whole body, to your extremities. Whereas if you sit down on the stool, there's less distance that blood has to travel from your extremities to your heart. So it is physics and biology, so I hope that makes sense to you. So that's something that Israel has to work out with his corner. Again, I do understand that fighters say, well, I always stand up while we're sparring in the gym, but you have to be realistic and not be in denial of science or biology and the fact that your body is going to be working harder during the fight simply due to the adrenaline circulating through your system. But thirdly and finally, the biggest factor that I have a question about for Israel is the choice to stay on the center line, stay in line with DuPLESSIS. Simply because of the fact that I brought up in the pre-fight breakdown, which is DuPLESSIS has a much bigger upper body mass. We know he wants that blast double. As soon as he starts generating a little bit of velocity in the forward direction, his momentum is going to be greater than Israel's momentum. And when the collision occurs, it's laws of physics dictate that DuPLESSIS will drive Israel back. So rather than remain on the center line like that and just wait for the double to wait for DuPLESSIS to shoot and then try to defend it, in my opinion, a better game plan would have been for Israel to create angles either to his 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock, because simply by making a small angle change, he could deflect DuPLESSIS' sort of forward movement, force DuPLESSIS to readjust, and then in that moment, pick him off with counter shots or shots. So I wouldn't expect Israel to turn himself into a Vasily Lomachenko, and he wouldn't need to. He wouldn't make to need such tight angle changes that Vasily's able to do. But to make some angle changes would have been, I think, to Israel's benefit. So I'm a little bit surprised that he and his camp didn't work on some of that. Now, I would also argue that Israel showed us slick striking defensive moves. For example, by making tight little slips backwards, and also rolling and weaving under Dricus's punches to make Dricus completely miss. I mean, that's very high-level striking defense. And so Israel has tons of athleticism in that department. Why not apply that to creating angles? Now, as far as what's next for Israel, well, in my opinion, I think he does need to take a look at body composition and get with a real expert strength coach to figure that out, because he does look like he's got smaller body mass, muscle mass in terms of his upper body and lower body in comparison to some of the other middleweights in his division. And so if he's not going to shift his game plan to take advantage of just being a little smaller and more agile, then he needs to kind of regroup and rethink things. On the other hand, I think he could also just work on what I just mentioned, which is using his athletic abilities to figure out how to create more angles and then add in some type of grappling threat. You can be a world-class striker and you could have great grappling defense, but it's not enough at this level. You do need to have at least one solid weapon at your disposal in the grappling game, whether it's a single leg takedown, a double leg, or trying to get to somebody, take someone's back. You must have a grappling threat that you can mix in there with your striking game just to keep your opponent on their toes, so to speak. So the good news, I think, for Israel, even though it might be a little bit mentally and emotionally painful to kind of reassess himself and admit to some holes in his game, it is an absolute opportunity for him to say, hey, let's try something new. Let's add a new wrinkle to my game. Hopefully he's not so taken with himself and his sort of superstardom that he's still willing to be a coachable athlete and collaborate with his coaches and teammates to step his game up just a little bit more. What's next for Dricus DuPLESSIS? Well, Dana White's already announced that Strickland had next over whoever won this fight, so it looks like DuPLESSIS will face Sean Strickland in a rematch. The only things I think that DuPLESSIS might want to work on in preparation for Sean Strickland would be a little more head movement to avoid taking those heavy shots from Sean, and also a little more feinting with his own strikes to set things up and disguise him a little better. Strickland is a much sort of different style striker than Izzy in that he likes to remain perfectly upright with his torso and then patiently wait and then counter. But I think we could agree that it looks like, to me, like Strickland is the sort of more heavy-handed puncher than Israel Adesanya. So tell me what you guys thought about the fight. Did you enjoy it? Who would you like to see Israel Adesanya face next? Who do you think wins the rematch between DuPLESSIS and Strickland? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to subscribe, share this video with your friends, and consider leaving either a super thanks or head over to buymeacoffee.com/Hamaguchi-fight and buy a coffee. If you'd like to see priority replies to your comments, please make sure you join as a member. For it's less than a cost of a coffee, you can become a member and earn your white belt today. Thanks for listening.